Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make some rust antique and patina looking prints. To start, I wanted to figure out what kind of textures could be used to get some kind of rusted looks. So I have this paint has mica beads in them, kind of has a texture. I don't like using this on my jelly plate because of the texture, and it actually makes little bead impressions on the gel plate. But I thought it might work if I put it on a scrap piece of something and let it dry, and then maybe I can use it to pull an impression. So I'm just kind of working on this little piece just to see if I can get this as a texture. While that's drying, I have these Liquitex paints. They're just some shimmery metallics. I'm only going to use the copper today because that looks like the kind of patina look that I'm going for, the copper. You do have to shake these. The metal or what the metallics do kind of settle in these. These are very liquid, so when I put them on the plate, they are already kind of just smearing, which is fine because this is kind of, I'm just playing around on this small gel plate to do a tester to see if I like what results I'm getting, and then I'll do my other prints on the larger gel plate. So I have a 5x7 that I'm practicing on and an 8x10 that I'll do my other prints on. I'm just using copy paper. So here I just sprayed my copper metallic paint with some water. It's just a little spritzer mini mister that I have. And then I just put my paper right down on top of that without waiting for any of the water to dry. You can see it's kind of coming through the top of the paper. This is what it looks like when you just pull wet paint from the gel plate. So I'm going to kind of use that as a building off point. So I'm putting some brown paint down over the top, and I am using my small brayer here. I wanted to get the look of lines in my gel print and then help create the texture. So this is that little texture piece that I created, and it's nice and dry now. And it is removing the paint, but it is looking more like just the cardboard. So, which is fine. It didn't have as much texture as I was hoping for. So I went ahead and just took my spray bottle. This is my larger spray bottle where I can drop large droplets of water onto the gel plate. So I let that paint dry around those blobs, and then I'm putting some just paint down next to, you can still see there's a little bit of water left on the gel plate. So now the paint is going to have a little bit of water mixed in with it. I'm just kind of playing around with what this is going to do. And I think I know what's going to happen, but it's kind of fun watching the gel plate and seeing what actually happens. So because I had water and then paint, some of that paint was removing from the gel plate. And that's typically what adding water will do, is it will remove paint. I'm putting my texture down again, this time doing it in a couple of different variations, sideways and long ways. Spraying down some more water, and then I'm taking a piece of paper to kind of sop up the water blobs. And then that leaves behind the look of water or texture on the gel plate, and now I have some of the jelly plate showing through, so I know this next color will show through those areas. So I'm using, this is a pistachio green color. And this is a golden fluid acrylic. This is the turquoise color. Next, I'm just going to brayer together the two colors, and this turquoise will lighten up as it mixes with the cracked pistachio color. I'm really liking how these two colors mix and look together. As you can see here where I'm brayering, parts of the gel plate are starting to show through, so the brayer is starting to pull up some of that paint. I really like how that looks because it's starting to look like rust or patina to the background here. Now I do have to be careful so I don't remove too much of this background. So I did stop there. I let my background dry, and now I'm adding just some water droplets again, some larger droplets of water, and then I'm gonna let those dry. So my paint wasn't completely dry when I dropped the water on, and that's important. If you drop your water on dry paint, it won't do anything. And so what it does on wet paint is everything around it will dry, the paint, and then everything left underneath those water droplets will remain. So then you can use a piece of paper and you can pull away those droplets, and it acts as a texture, a water droplet texture. So I thought that was really cool for the look that I was going for here. Just looking to do some aged patina and rusted looks. Now rust and even copper, as it's becoming a patina, has an orange kind of orangish color to it. So I have this metallic color and a clay color. So I am mixing these together just to try to see if I can get some kind of rusty looking color. So I am just gonna brayer off the extra paint onto there because I'm going to be using that next. If you're wondering what I'm using to line up my paper here, I made a placement tool and I will link that video. Here is my larger gel plate. As I'm waiting for the small print to dry, I'm putting large water droplets on top of the orange paint that I have on there. And I'm going to let those drop. So what I do is I take off and remove some of those drops. And then there's still going to be some wet paint or some wet water drops left on the plate, and then I let those dry. So here's the reveal of this first mini print. And you can see here, it's got some really cool different colors of some browns and greens, blues, and oranges. So next, for my larger plate, I already have that orange down on the plate, but it's a very light amount of orange. So I'm taking my black, I'm just gonna give a little bit of kind of like dirtiness to my background. I like using black also because it's a great contrasting color to all the other colors I put on the plate. Going back in with my texture plate that I created, just pulling up some of the paint and creating some of those lines from the cardboard. To pull away some of the color, I am using my water again, misting or dropping large droplets onto the plate. And then I use a little table fan to just let that paint around the water dry. Once the paint is dry, the water droplets will still be wet unless you wait a very long time. I only waited about maybe 5 minutes. And then I pulled away again the water droplets to reveal the design that it left underneath. It actually looks kind of like coffee to me, two little coffee stains. It's pretty cool. So if that is dry, then I can move on to my next layer. For this one, I'm just going in with a lighter brown color. This is almost like a mushroom color. And then I'm going to introduce an ivory. Now I'm going back in while my paint is still wet, and again, dropping down some large water droplets. I'm also using my sprayer to spritz and then drop so that I get little tiny dots and some larger dots. I do let that dry just so that all the paint around it is dry again, and then I come back and remove the droplets. And you can see how cool that looks. And you'll see there's still some spots that the water droplets are still on the plate, so I just go back in with a dry part of my paper to pull that up. Next I've got that Georgia clay color, and then I've got the copper Liquitex. I'm going to brayer those two colors together. My focus is to get them near where those dots are, the spots of water. And intentionally, I am trying to brayer a little longer than I normally would to, again, try to remove some paint. Now that my layer is dry, I have this terracotta paint. It's cavern moss, and then I have another brown paint here. I'm going to mix them. So the terracotta actually has a thicker texture to this paint than the other acrylics do. So when I brayer out this thicker paint, it will dry faster than the more fluid paints will. So they mix together pretty nicely here in the middle. And I'm just gonna, again, this isn't my final layer, so I'm not too concerned if the terracotta starts drying on me a little bit. I am using my smaller brayer here to try to remove some of that excess paint. More water droplets. Let them dry and remove them with my piece of paper. And I do try to put my water droplets over the spots previous, because if you're dropping on and it's not revealing the jelly plate, you're not really going to see those drops. So the important thing is making sure you can see the gel plate. Going back in with this pistachio color. And again, here you want to focus on any areas that show the gel plate. If you can't see the gel plate, you probably won't see these colors. Now I have this Dilutions spray. It's just a spray stain, and I'm very carefully just doing the same thing I was doing with the water and dropping on some of this liquid, but it's colored liquid. So I decided to try to brayer this blue in with the green and see if that would lighten it, and just to see what it would do. It mixed the colors, so that was pretty cool to see, and it made the colors more of the blue-green that I liked for this technique. I did let those dry, and now I'm going in with copper. And I'll mix it with some of my black. This is a 6-inch brayer, and that's what I'm going to use to try to get coverage with these paint colors. Now this paint was not thick enough to pull the print up, so I went in with some more water droplets. Let them dry. And removed them. Now I have a metallic zinc color and a brown. And this is the color, the layer that's going to pull the whole print up. So I did have to make sure I had a good amount of paint on the plate, but not too much. And I do try, when I'm pulling the actual print, I try to make sure I'm careful to add paint on all four corners, because those tend to get missed for me. So I do pay a little more attention to those corners, just make sure there's wet paint on all four corners and on the edges. And then just make sure you press in really nice and even, pressing into each of those four corners, and then let it dry. I wait about, for these full final prints, I wait about 15 minutes before I pull this final print. And so here is the brown. This one has more of a brown tone to it. You can't see the terracotta in this one as much, but you can see the patina look to it. So it does look still like rust and patina, and there's a little bit of shimmer in there. So for this next one, I'm going to start with a brown and an orange. I'm trying to get a rusty color. I have a darker orange, it's more of a coral color, so I'm going to use that one as well. This paint is more fluid, and it happens to be already having some little spots showing in it. So I'm just going to use that and run with it and add my water to it. Let the paint dry around my water droplets. And remove the water droplets so you're getting the hang of with this. And this is a really cool way to just create really interesting looks with just using water alone. So you can remove as much or as little as you like. This one, I removed the water droplets before the paint had dried completely, and so you can see it removed a lot more of the paint as well as the water droplets, but I wanted to have a larger opening in the center where I could add other colors in, so I wanted more of the jelly plate showing at this point. Then I'm going in with my black and brown mixed together. So the next steps are basically repeating what I had been doing. I'm going to brayer on, spritz some water, let it dry, remove the water droplets, and keep going in layer after layer. So that is going to be kind of the pattern that you'll see for these prints. The difference that I'm doing in each print is where I'm adding the color. So whether one of them I started with orange on the front, one of them I started with brown on the front, one with black, and it just changes how the outcome of the print is based off what color you start with, and then also what color you end with or put in the background. In this case, I had some of that spray, the distress spray, actually was the dilution spray, and I mixed this with the ivory paint instead of the green paint this time. And then I'm just brayering it out, and remember the stain is more fluid, very liquid, so it has the look of water already. And then I'm just spraying right over the top and kind of blending out the water droplets this time. And what I'm trying to get is when you put water on a gel plate, it starts removing the paint when you keep brayering over it. So I'm intentionally brayering over it so I can remove some of that paint. But I did see that some of it was just removing in like a square pattern. So I used my paper and pressed down, and then I got these cool little blotchy patterns. So it's just a fun way to experiment and play around with just using your fingers, some water, and some paper, and getting different textures. And it's really neat to see how they turn out. So this is back with that golden turquoise paint. I'm spraying water into each of the little spots that I put some paint down. And then I'll just use my brayer and brayer that out. And you can see, because I sprayed that water on the golden fluid acrylic, that those paints automatically kind of separate on their own when they're introduced with water. Sometimes they'll even separate on their own when they're not introduced with water, just because they are so fluid. So I was getting that to happen, and I really liked it. And I removed some of the paint just so that I can have, again, more of the gel plate showing through, so I could put another layer behind it. Now that I had my whole gel plate dried, I went in with some pearl powders. I have a copper color and a light, I guess it's kind of like a light gold. And I'm just blending those two colors together. Then I just take a rag and remove the excess powders, and taking my ivory, I will pull the whole entire print with this ivory paint. I started seeing that the paint was pulling up because it's a very thick with so many layers, so I just stopped. Even though normally I would go a thinner coat, but I just stopped there because I didn't want it pulling up anymore now that this was my final layer. I let it dry for about 15 minutes, and I'm kind of pulling away all 4 of my sides to make sure none of it is sticking to the plate, and then I'll pull my entire print off. This helps get a really clean removal of my print. So this one's looking much more interesting to me. It has like the rust and blue together. It's got this really cool, the black has like a crackling to it, and the orange on the front just looks different than the copper color of the mica powders. So it's definitely a really interesting looking rusty print. So I thought this one looked really cool. Then I wanted to start with black as my base layer. I'm mixing it with a little bit of the copper Liquitex. And what this is going to do, the Liquitex is a very transparent paint, and the black mixing with the Liquitex means that when you hold your completed print in the light, it's going to look black in one area, and then when you tilt it into the light, it'll look like copper. It's a pretty cool effect. You can see here, again, I'm getting those water spots already just before I even added my water, so I'm adding more water and just taking my piece of paper and blotting away some of the water. This area here, I wanted to remove more of the paint, and in the other corner as well, so I'm just taking my brayer to those areas and just removing a little more of that paint. Now this is going to be my final print, and I thought the texture that I wanted to try for this print was the look of dripping water. So I am removing some of this paint, but it is still wet. I have not let it dry. And so I'm going in with my water and this time building up the little droplets until they start moving. And then once they start traveling down, that's the goal, is I want to have like a little trail of the water and it will leave that trail behind in the paint. And I'm just using my rag to catch the drips of water. And now I'm going to let that dry. The water drops are still wet, so I'm removing the water drops. And then I'm going to go in with my Titan Buff. This is kind of an ivory white. I'm going to spray that over the background. Get some more texture going by adding more water. I'll let the paint dry around the water drops, and now I'm going to let those drip as it's drying. And again, I'm focusing my spots in the areas where I knew the paint was removed in the layer before it. Same thing, once I let that paint dry, I went in with my paper and removed the water droplets. It's looking very messy. I love it. It already looks like drippy paint, and that's what I was going for. Once I'm satisfied that my water droplets are all removed, I will, and I'm going back in on the parts that look like the drips, because I really want to make sure those show through on the final print. If you don't take the time to remove those, they won't show through. I'm mixing the ivory with the turquoise this time. It's actually the Titan Buff. And I'm going to spray a little more water over this layer. Use my dryer tool to let the paint dry, and again go in. I removed the water droplets and now I'm going in with my pearl powders. This time I only used the copper Perfect Pearl. Thanks for being with me here today as I'm making these interesting looking prints. If this is your style, awesome. If not, maybe you learned something that will make you want to try some water on your gel plate. I actually saw Eddie using water on his gel plate on a recent video he had done. I'll link that video in the description. Eddie Makes Art is the channel. He also does gel prints and he makes stencils for a company called PM Artist Studio. He designs them, and so do a lot of other very talented and amazing artists. But he had done some water on his gel plate and then did iridescence and layers, and his looked completely different than mine. So it all depends on how you go through and do your technique, and you can get some totally different designs. So check them out if you're interested. So this is what the print looks like with the drippy looks to it. So I thought this looks so cool, like old drippy paint, maybe something you would see on a rusted out like Ford pickup or something, with the blue and the copper, then the dark colors of the black. I just thought this one looked so neat, and it really, to me, looked like the drippy paint. So this was my first tester print that I had done with a little more orange and blues and greens. but this one had a really cool crackle to it. So I was really happy with how that one looked. This one had more of the brown to it and a little greenish blue in the background. Didn't have as much of the water drop texture. So this was where I was still trying to figure out how much water to get the texture. This next one has a lot more of the texture. So this has the crackling of the paint. You can see where the black crackles over the orange and the blue. And then you get that great blue and ivory color mixed with those perfect pearls in the background. And it just looks so cool. And then this last one again has the drippy look to it. In the one light, it looks black, and you tilt it and it looks copper. So that's mixing that black and copper. And then you can see the blue in there and the metallics behind the water droplets. I think these were so fun. I would totally do more of these. These remind me of maybe something I would use to create a book cover, or like make a door out of, like a rusty old door for inside of a junk journal or something. But I definitely had fun making these. What would you make with these rusty looking prints? Is this something that you would try to recreate, or would you have some other suggestions on how to do that? Or what other textures would you use? If you've tried doing rust and patina before on your gel plate, what else have you used? I'd be curious to know, because I think these turned out great, but I really just used water in that one texture plate that I made out of cardboard. So I will probably see if I enjoy this, if I might try some different textures in the future. And thank you for being here and watching. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, happy crafting, y'all.